We'll be talking a lot about building our PLNs this semester, and this video is intended to help you with some of those initial steps. People naturally develop their PLNs, which are personal learning networks. Sometimes you hear people say professional rather than personal, and that's because they're trying to indicate that they are focused on building a network for their profession. However, the personal in PLN really refers to the fact that it's personal, it's yours and not anybody else's, whether it is focused on topics of personal interest or of professional interest. The L for learning just indicates that what's going to be happening through this PLN is learning. It may not always be formal learning. There may be a lot of informal learning taking place. And finally, the N is for network. The learning occurs in a networked environment where you are connected to people, organizations, ideas, spaces, all sorts of wonderful things. This is different from communities, however, which are groups that we have membership in or can somehow join. The PLN definition that's given by Krutka, Carpenter, and Trust, whose work we're reading, is that it is a uniquely personalized network that can support participatory and continuous learning. Again, the emphasis is network, not community. So keep in mind that PLNs, they're not tools. Facebook is a technology. Sometimes people will call it a tool. It's not really even considered a tool in the context of PLN, but it is not a PLN. A website is not a PLN. An online community or group itself is not a PLN. But your PLN probably includes all three of these kinds of things. Your personal learning network is going to be unique. So yours isn't going to look like anybody else's in the class or mine. And that's because it reflects who you are, who you know, and what you're interested in. Note that I have both learning and sharing on this slide because in a PLN you will learn and you will share. Your PLN is going to change over time. We often think of it as growing and getting bigger, but sometimes people scale them back, and that's fine too. In your PLN, you might have one that is focused on a single topic, or it might be a large one that spans multiple topics. This is all up to you and what works for you. The framework of PLNs, again, this comes from Krutka, Carpenter, and Trust's work, talks about people, spaces, and tools, and then goes through phases of identification, reflection, and intention. So if we think about this, at the identification phase, you're thinking about who's in your PLN, the spaces where you engage with those people, and the tools that you acquire through those activities. Note that this is a very different way of thinking about tools, what you acquire through the activities, not necessarily technologies that you use to access various people. Those technologies actually come under spaces here, technology supported spaces like a Facebook group, for example. Um, Part of the framework is reflecting, and it's through reflecting that we can make change in our PLN. So we think about who as a person and what spaces have been contributing to our professional growth, what tools we're getting from these spaces and how they contribute to our professional growth. And in this larger cycle, then that leads to intention, where we start to think about what we want next out of our PLNs, who we need to connect to, what spaces we need to find ourselves in. For me, in my PLN, well, I'm a university professor. That's my context. My needs are usually keeping in touch with colleagues, both here at FSU and elsewhere, keeping in touch with journals, with trends in technology, trends in the profession. There's always stuff going on, and I need to stay updated with it. The amount of time that I have for this, honestly, it ebbs and flows. I find that during the summer when I teach this class, it's a good time for me to really attend to my PLN because this is such an exploratory class and I encourage you to explore so I can encourage myself to explore as well. In the middle of the semester though, or when I'm on a trip, it's really hard for me to keep up. Then again, sometimes I procrastinate other tasks by engaging with my PLN, which I find far more pleasurable. If I start to think about my PLN in terms of the people, spaces, and tools, the people, there are all these types of people, these categories that I interact with. And the first four on here are people who I know very well, but I might also think about aspirational collaborators and thought leaders who I would want to connect with so that we might develop some sort of relationship in the future. Some of the spaces that are part of my PLN might include LinkedIn, Facebook groups. These are where I have connections with people I know. Blogs where people are writing things and I get ideas. I follow them. I use a lot of helper tools, I should note. So, for example, RSS feeds are helper tools that I use to keep up with my PLN. Some of the groups that I belong to still have listservs. And I say that as groups I belong to. Actually, I just belong to these listservs. They're not necessarily always listservs of coherent groups, but they do bring together people who I might find connections with in my network. I also have some private groups that I belong to, usually through proprietary community based tools. But these spaces bring me connections with people who I know and people who I want to know. Finally, tools. Remember, I said that this wasn't going to be the technologies, this wasn't going to be the specific social media tools, even though those are a part of this whole PLN ecosphere. But the tools that I get from my PLN are ideas, resources, and practices that will help me do my job better. So let's think a little bit about your PLN and how you're going to develop it this term. As you build your PLN, you need to find the people that you want to follow. The paths that are going to be before you are great places to keep going. So if you find a person, if you find a group, keep going with it. Look for recommendations from the different tools that you're acquiring along the way. Participate in events, lots of online webinars and conferences, and they'll give you more references to different groups that you might join. You'll find people there. I know a lot of us aren't on Twitter anymore, but let me tell you, there are still some active Twitter chats and hashtags where you can be finding people who you want to interact with. Spread your contact information. Make sure that when you sign up for different technologies, different social media platforms, that you're completing your profiles, that you're doing things to connect your networks if you want to. And it's okay if you don't. Be real deliberate about that. Don't let the opportunity go by if you really want to be building a larger network. But if you're trying to keep parts of your life private, then be very intentional about not making the connections. If you're trying to promote making connections, you might include information on in your email signature, on slides when you present, or documents that you send around. Give people the URLs to your LinkedIn profile, to your blog, to wherever else you might want to be connected with them. Don't feel like you have to do it all at once. When you have time, that's when you build your PLN. And this class is the opportunity for you. To learn about new tools, to keep up with feeds. There's a lot going on. Sometimes I see things pass me by and that's not the moment for it, but I save things. I save an awful lot of things that come across from the people and spaces where I interact because I might say, hey, that's a tool that I want for someday, not right now, and that I can hold on to it and go back to it later. It's perfectly okay to lurk in any spaces. That helps you learn the norms for how you might be more active in those spaces. And that's something you'll start to see as we engage in our community assignment. And when you feel ready to share, absolutely share what you can. For people, think about who you want your online colleagues to be. This may be replicating your school and work network, but you might be developing new networks along the way, and that can be really exciting. Think about how you're going to communicate. You might be an observer and a follower initially, but then you can start to ask questions. As you start to feel more confident, you can give advice and support or be sharing resources and socializing with other people. When you think about contributions in a network, reciprocity becomes a really big issue. Um, you don't want to be somebody who takes all the time. You want to have something to give. And even if you feel like you don't have a lot to give right now, sometimes it's as simple as a like or rating something that you've used or giving a little comment to somebody who has been a big sharer. And that form of low level reciprocity can be really valued. Eventually, you might get to the point where you start to share things that you've created on your own. So I'm going to leave you with a challenge. This is the PLN Visual Challenge. Use a visual tool. Canva.com is great. We're going to use it later this term, but maybe you're not there yet, and that's okay. And create some sort of depiction of your current PLN. Think about your people and your spaces and the tools that you're getting from it. Don't worry about getting it perfect or right. Just work on making a visual depiction of what's going on for you in this online network that you're developing for yourself. Share it on your blog, explain it to us, and be sure to use the title PLN Visual Challenge so that I'll note right away that that's what you're doing with it. Happy challenge! There is a badge for you if you do it.